Hello and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art that is ascending above the mainstream. This is Mike with Catalytic Comics, your host with co-hosts Joey from Keeper's Cairn and Vinny from Little Chad. And tonight we've got our guests, HVK Americanon of the Americanon Podcast. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing very well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Very good. And I know you've got a podcast of your own, and it covers a pretty good variety of topics from comics, art, entertainment, and even some tabletop gaming. So, yeah, first, I guess, tell us a little bit about the podcast, and we'll just kind of go on with some of the stuff we're talking about earlier in the show from there.
Well, it's kind of funny. You say I cover a lot of stuff, and the original intention was really to just kind of cover the pop culture stuff because, in a lot of ways, like I grew up with the idea, and maybe it's just given my background, but the ideas of like culture and art, like I viewed that as like hoity-toity kind of crap, for lack of a better term, if that makes sense. Like it was just, I'm reading comics. I didn't think of it as art. I thought of it as like entertainment or in some sense of literature, right? I never really associated writing with art, which obviously was just ignorant on my part. So it wasn't until I kind of got older and I started, one of the things I went to school for was history. And I kind of saw the tie-in to history and those cultural aspects of it and how art in many ways was a big part of that. And that includes not just painting or anything of that sort. It's a wide variety of what I would call creation sort of topics, whether it's sculpting, comics, writing, whatever it might be. And it originally started out just to focus on those things. And right after I started it, this was right around the summer of 2020, everything went insane. And me being a military guy and, in a nerdy kind of way, I take my oaths very seriously. I decided that, well, I just couldn't hold myself back, and it spread out into things well outside that realm. So it sometimes is a little bit of a disorganized shotgun approach. I'm willing to admit that, but it's just, whatever is on my mind at the time, I just kind of roll with, and perhaps not the best, but you know what, it's my show, and anyone who doesn't like it doesn't really have to listen is kind of my approach to that. I'm not holding a gun to anybody's head, and I'm not begging anybody to listen to it.
Yeah, but even still, you definitely had some good content and commentary. I've been listening to a few episodes lately, and I know part of that we're also talking a little bit pre-show about the whole concept of art does come just kind of from the heart and mind of the artist making it. And I know that's something we were recently talking about was, especially in the comic space, there have just been some absolutely nutty comics out there. It just makes you wonder, like, what was in the mindset of the both the person writing it, but then also the editors just checking off on it as it gets to production.
Yeah, I think we were talking about Nature Girl and X-Men Green and that framing. What's in the heart of someone that writes something like that. And again, I say this is somebody who has done violent acts, I guess would be the best way to frame it and keep it kid friendly. And it's when your initial action, looking at Nature Girl and X-Men Green and the whole stabbing a guy in the neck with a pair of scissors over a plastic bag because he was just like, well, who cares that somebody threw it out and it, didn't get recycled or whatever. To me, that immediately says that the writer, that's somebody who has a lot of violence in their heart, so to speak. If you're talking about something coming from the heart, if that's the first place you go to, then there's a lot of violence in that person's heart and soul, so to speak. And, it's one thing when you have a writer that writes a character like, I read a lot of the Agent Venom stuff, big fan of the Agent Venom stuff. And this is a guy who is or was a soldier, and he will still kill, right? But he gets pushed to it. It's not his default.
The way, just to jump in, the way they redeemed Flash Thompson as a character with the Agent Venom storyline, going, having him, enlist, lose limbs in combat, and Venom symbiote as a way for him to regain capability and self-worth, and then mastering the symbiote. It was a super underrated storyline, and I'm really annoyed that they kind of just moved on from it to go back to the Venom things. To me, it was actually the most story-rich Venom take that I'd seen pretty much since the character started.
Oh, as far as hero, I said this to a buddy of mine, my college roommate, who is he's also a comic book guy, and I was like, I have no problem saying Eddie Brock is the best Venom. Flash Thompson is the best hero Venom, and it's not really me being biased, totally admitting to being biased. It's not up for conversation, right? Like, it is 100% the best heroic version of the character. But as soon as they announced that they were going to do a Venom movie with Sony and everything like that, I was like, they're going to find a way to pull this thing off of him and stick it back on Eddie Brock, right? Because that's they have to find a way to market it. So I kind of wish they had perhaps used Toxin on Flash Thompson and gone that way, because we perhaps would have gotten a longer thing, a longer story arc with it, instead of the whole Agent Anti-Venom thing and all that stuff that they ended up doing with him. But you're not going to find any argument from me. I think his whole run was wildly underrated, and then he just kind of sat in limbo when they did the whole Space Knight thing, which I'm not going to lie, that was really terrible. But everything before that I thought was really good. But it tells you got me distracted. I could talk about that character for a while, but it tells you what's in, somebody's worldview, right? Like the idea that, that level of lethal violence being acceptable when you're pushed to it, versus you're the instigator with that level of violence, which is what Nature Girl is. So then it calls into question, like, well, what do you actually consider a hero to be? Is it somebody that uses, for lack of a better term, violence in a protective manner, or is it somebody that instigates it for their own worldview?
I mean, she could have at least done it with a little more sense of irony and like put a plastic bag over the guy's head and choked him with it. But it was
that would at least been funny.
Yeah, this was just brutality for vengeance sake, and it didn't fit the story. It didn't send a message. It didn't teach a lesson. It was just brutality.
Exactly, and that's somebody's definition of a hero. Not just like they took an existing hero that was already like unstable. Like, let's say Wolverine suddenly got a green thumb, and Wolverine wouldn't do that either. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, right? And
I don't know, like the Wolverine that was living with Jean Grey and Cyclops on the moon probably might. Am I the only one who knows about that story?
I vaguely. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big X-Men. I'm not huge on team books outside like the Ninja Turtles, mostly because there's just usually too many characters for me to try and be invested in one particular story. But that's just me.
Yes,
like I don't do like Avengers and all that.
To catch you up in the new like Krakoa storyline X-Men, where they're pretty much all just villain, terrible people. Jean Grey, Wolverine, James Howlett, Logan, whatever name you want to use for him now that we know his origin. So Scott Summers, Wolverine, and Jean Grey were living on the moon, sharing like adjoining rooms, and were sort of in a throuple, I guess is what they were calling it. Whatever, it's weird. And so I didn't need my X-Men. That's the question, right? I feel like it's Wolverine in that situation.
That's no.
I mean, I think we all want our Wolverine sitting on a bed, staring at a picture of Jean, saying "Jean," like in X-Men the animated series. That's how it needs to go.
Apparently, while she's in the next room.
No.
What? Oh my gosh.
Well, that's also telling to me, because I've come to the conclusion with some of the stuff they've done to Spider-Man over the years, in particular, and some of the recent stuff they're doing with him and Mary Jane and all that.
Yeah, where they're fast forwarding and they're giving her like a new husband, and he's like a stalker ex-boyfriend. Yeah.
Well, I've come to the conclusion that the writers don't like the idea of functional relationships. Like, one of the best attributes of Spider-Man was the fact that he was a superhero that had a completely functional marriage that came complete with the trials and tribulations of, if you want to call it, his career path as a superhero. So that made for a lot of interesting storytelling, and it kind of, again, made that everyman appeal of Peter that existed there. And then they just kind of casually discarded it as if they were like, oh, this isn't working. And it's like, well, that's worked for 30 years before you Galaxy Brains showed up and decided that no superhero can have a functioning relationship unless apparently it's some weird polyamorous thing, which, that'll end well. For some reason, those go just fine. But a normal relationship, a normal marriage,
they're wonderful in theory. Look at a few in practice.
Well, yeah, there's what was the one where it was like one woman and 5 dudes, and then she got pregnant.
And then she got pregnant by one of them, and one of the other dudes, I think, tried to kill the baby.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not. We are not that kind of animal. Okay, humans made for life.
I was gonna say, like,
coding.
or you could just in that case go ahead and watch Chinese dramas where it's about the emperor and his like dozens of wives, and it's pretty much the drama of like all
who
the
are
wives
all scheming to get each other knocked off.
Well,
yes,
I mean,
that's pretty much every show of that format.
if you want the American shorthand version of that, you watch Big Trouble in Little China, and it's when Lo Pan decides he needs to marry both girls. So
Exactly.
because one's for Marion and one's for fun, or sacrificing, I guess was in the Big Trouble in Little China storyline, right? He had to sacrifice one bride to the god of the West, and he was going to keep the other one.
Sorry, my brain works in weird ways sometimes. So you were talking. This was Hickman, I think, right? That wrote the Krakoa thing, right?
Yep.
That was also really telling to me because it was like, okay, the entire point of the X-Men was in many ways like Xavier's vision was integration with mutants and humans, because mutants were just the next step in evolution of humans. Like that was the entire point. And yet Marvel's great idea is, hey, we're going to create effectively an ethno state of mutants. Like, again, with the ideas being very telling of the people behind them, it's like, what are you trying to say with that?
So I do think, and this is because I was a Hickman fan, and so I think he had a long-term storyline to expose these people as not the genuine, like, real X-Men, because there was a lot of stuff very early. Jonathan Hickman works in like year arcs, right? He plans for years. And if you really want to see what Jonathan Hickman can do with a storyline, go back to his Fantastic Four run, which is amazing. Like what he did with the Reed Richards and Sue Storm and their family, and showing them as a functional family, because a lot of people like to knock the Fantastic Four, and the go-to storyline for bad writers is Reed Richards is the absentee father, husband, and so Sue Storm starts, creeping on Namor in the DMs and doing all those other things, and it's not very. But if you want a good one, you go with somebody like Hickman, who made it all about how Reed is actually a very committed family person. He's doing, like, the reason he might be absentee is because he's working on ways to solve the problems of the universe for his family, right? So I think, going back to the X-Men thing, if you look at the very first story arc in the Krakoa storyline, it centered on Moira McTaggart, who, for X-Men movie fans, she was the one that Rose Byrne played in the movies. That was sort of Xavier's girlfriend. She's been sort of Xavier's girlfriend in the comic books for 50 years too. Anyway, it turns out she was a mutant, but she's got a random, basically, Joey will appreciate this, a reset by death power, where when she dies, she goes back she loops to the beginning of her life and remembers everything. So she can keep reliving, her life to try to make better choices. But I think that plot was designed with that element to show that she knew things had gone wrong, and was gonna be a big time travel-y, timeline kind of thing. And Marvel just didn't have the heart to do it, so they backed up the Brinks truck to pay him, and he didn't care because he got paid. So he just kind of moved on from his actual plan for the storyline. Because if you've read Jonathan Hickman's work, you can sort of see where that was going to be going in that direction, and it just kind of just got hijacked by other Marvel writers who demanded, because there was a big thing, like when Hickman came on, he was like, there's only going to be one X-Men book, and it's the one I'm writing, because we need to clean up the X-Men continuity, because there's so many X-Men books at that point. And because it was Jonathan Hickman, immediately people in Bleeding Cool and some of those other type sites started putting out stories about how can we have the X-Men only written by a certain type of writer and not a diverse writer, and we need to have more of that. And I think it got hijacked, and Hickman got paid, and so he was like, peace out, I don't really care, I don't need this, I've got the check. So it's disappointing. But if you go back, I would say go and read his Fantastic Four run. It's awesome. That's where they came up with the Council of Reeds, which is something that Rick and Morty ripped off as a joke with the Council of Ricks. where it was the multiverse one, and it was great because the Council of Reeds had a special room where each of them, as their rite of passage, had to basically lobotomize their universe's Doctor Doom, because there was no way to actually negate Doctor Doom. He would always figure out a way out of any trap that they tried to put him in, because Doctor Doom is the evil version of Reed Richards when written right. And so the big solution that all the Reeds came up with is we're going to lobotomize them and just put them in a room so they can't. We didn't actually murder them, and so we're still good people. We just put them in there. And then the main Marvel Universe, Reed Richards, like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a good person. And so he left. So good, fun storyline.
I can definitely see that, because I haven't actually read anything by Hickman, but I know his reputation from a lot of the comic boards and whatnot. I've been on in like the early 2000s and into the the 20 teens and all that. So I haven't read it. I'm willing to. He always struck me a little bit as more of not a one-for-one comparison here, but a little bit like a Grant Morrison style writer in that sense,
yes.
where it's this big picture kind of writing. Like I said, I haven't read anything by him. I have by Grant Morrison. I haven't read anything by him specifically, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt there. At the very least, with the whole what is it, Krakatoa? Or sorry, like I said, I haven't read it. Thing is turned into, from my understanding of it, it sounded a lot like a mutant ethnos. Even if that's not the original intent, that's kind of what it's become under other writers. And that, like I said, it's very telling in that manner of just like, oh, for the X-Men to really find peace and happiness, and that we just have to separate them. And I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting conclusion you might come to as a writer, especially based on a lot of what the origins of the X-Men is kind of rooted in.
Oh, they're 100% terrible people in this story. Like, so and this comes to mind because it was Hickman. It was, technically, Reed Richards and Sue Storm's son, Franklin Richards, is an omega level mutant. Like, he can rewrite reality.
He's the one that like creates universes for fun in his bed.
Exactly.
And whatnot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So he's everything that the Scarlet Witch is allegedly able to do in the Marvel movies. And in the Krakoa storyline, the X-Men come for him because they have a right on their mind to have all mutants. Like, all mutants must live with them. They must go to Krakoa. They must do that. And Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four basically fight them. They tell them to no. And Reed Richards basically had come up with a system to be able to teleport into Krakoa to get their kid back. And long story short, eventually, I think they let the X-Men and Charles Xavier and Magneto, and I'm doing air quotes here, let Franklin stay with his family because they're being magnanimous. Like, they let like a 10-year-old stay with his family. That's so nice.
Well, it's funny because you're telling me that, and all I hear is a lot of the stuff you hear coming out of like school officials and things like that, where it's like, your kids aren't, and I say this is, we just had our first kid. He's only 4 months old. And I hear these things now when people say them, and like the dad instincts kick in immediately. And it becomes like a whole, like, you want him, come and take him, and you can do it over my dead freaking body. Let me tell you, like, that whole concept where it's like, oh, we have more of a right to your son than you do because he's a mutant. And it's like, who thought, like, these are the heroes. And like, that's what blows my mind. Like, this is your hero.
Completely backward social construction in which it's like, no, we only needed you long enough to create the child. Now, like, it's our property. It's property of the state.
Yes.
Right?
What's up? But what I was but the end of the real end of this story arc is Charles Xavier and Magneto going to visit Reed Richards in his workshop, and they basically pass judgment on him, and Professor X goes into Reed Richards' mind and basically scrambles it. He's like, you are not allowed to be able to, because you are smart enough to, and you built like a teleporting system that could actually, and what he did, I remember now, he was able to figure out a way to mask Franklin Richards so that they couldn't take him. They couldn't find him because they had a system, through Cerebro and everything to find any mutant. Mm-hmm. And so, Professor X and Magneto didn't like that, so they scrambled it. So the Professor X told him, he's like, if you ever try to think of how to build that machine again, you'll never be able to do it. I've blocked that part of your brain. I went in there and psychically, I'll use the term again, lobotomize that section. You'll never be able to build it. You won't be able to think of it. You'll just have like a hole in your brain so that because you're not allowed to basically keep your son from us or any other person who doesn't want to be on the mutant agenda. And it was like, that is so like super villain. And that's one of the other things where this was very early in Hickman's run too. And he used the Fantastic Four, and they even from Susan Storm and Reed Richards' mouth, they said, you guys are acting like villains. You guys are being Dr. Dooms. You guys are not being heroes when you're doing these things. And it was so early. And when you tag that with the Moira McTaggart stuff, I was 100% thinking this was going, and you can see the groundwork he had laid over the long term. It was going to be where there was something going on, messing with these people, and they weren't because they were all clones, right? That's one of the other parts of the storyline. They were all cloned bodies from the Krakoa could actually create bodies for them. And then they would download their memories into the clone bodies, so they were effectively immortal. And so any mutant that got killed or had ever been killed could be rebuilt and re-downloaded. But I think there was going to come up or something where you found out, eventually that, when you look at the man behind the curtain, they were being built wrong. They were not the actual people. And that's where it was going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they stopped it way short. And it reminds me of when they screwed up Doctor Who.
I'm listening again. I haven't read it, so I'm hearing what you're saying there, and I can't honestly see honest writing of Magneto where coming from his background, right? Especially with all the Nazi persecution and everything that's in Magneto's background. I can't possibly see him in an X-Men world where they're behaving in this manner and the red flags aren't like firing off left and right in his head.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, because Magneto's been written like that. I mean, Magneto, from what he took from the experience of the Holocaust as a survivor, was
wasn't his biggest takeaway always, we have to do it to them before they do it to us?
Yes, it was, basically okay. It was the Israel defense. We need a strong homeland and our own people to be able to defend ourselves. So in the comics, he did Genosha, the mutant island.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that was where he created the mutant homeland, and then it got hit by an asteroid and wiped out. I mean, there was a lot of stuff in the 90s. That's when he was really mad. And if you remember the famous cover where he rips the adamantium out of Wolverine, which was a Fatal Attraction. That was like an epic storyline. Like that cover, and that was, if you want a fun comic book like read, if you go back and, because these storylines used to only be like 6 or 7 issues, so you can get through them in like 40 minutes. But when like Wolverine, and it was hilarious because like, why would Wolverine's the worst person to try to take on Magneto, but like they were in a situation where he was trying, and Magneto just like holds his hands up and he's like, nope, we're not doing this, and he liquefies and pulls out all the adamantium out of his body, and then Wolverine just collapses down. It was amazing. That's when he found out his claws were bone and were there before the adamantium was bonded to him. And it was just, that was 90s comics right there, man. You just had crazy stuff. That was not long either. That was either right before or right after the Age of Apocalypse, which is another great storyline.
Yeah, that one I did read.
That was the one where they flipped the script, where Legion had gone back in time and accidentally, because he was trying to kill Magneto in the old days, because his father was Charles Xavier, and he didn't want Charles Xavier to have to deal with Magneto screwing up his dream for his whole life. And Legion accidentally killed Charles Xavier. And in terms of timeline consequences, this was back before timelines got complicated in Marvel comic books. Once he made that change, it was Back to the Future style, and the entire future got rewritten as the Age of Apocalypse, because without Professor X there to form the X-Men, Apocalypse was able to do all his stuff, because Magneto was the one who tried to form the X-Men to live the dream his friend had, but he was a poor Charles Xavier and couldn't do it, so he wasn't able to stop Apocalypse from taking over everything. It's an awesome storyline. Just now we're just talking about 90s comic book runs.
I'm thinking. Well, it's funny because you talk about. There's 2 things that killed. Like I walked away from comics probably in like the mid to late 90s, because there's 2 things that ended up killing at the very least, Marvel for me, which was time travel, which I've always had a pet peeve against, and clones. And it seems like we want to go in those directions again.
Are you talking about the Clone Saga with Spider-Man?
Yeah, it eventually got to the point where it was so out of control for me. I couldn't. I'm like, I just can't do this. And I just
became just like the meme of like all the Spider-Mans pointing at each other.
Yeah, it really was. It was just like this one's the real one, and then we arbitrarily remove Peter's powers so that way Ben can exist and be the Scarlet Spider, and we can have something there. And it's just there's all kinds of craziness.
His costume was pretty awesome for 90s.
Oh, for sure.
Like the hoodie sweatshirt, like over the red. It was a pretty cool. And then and what I loved about Ben Reilly Spider-Man is the MFer knew that Peter always ran out of web fluid, so he had the little cartridge things everywhere. He had them on his ankle, had them on his wrists. He's like, Ben Reilly was not going to be running out of web fluid. That sounds dirty, but it's
that was like quintessential 90s comics though. When I think 90s comics, I think in a gratuitous amount of pouches everywhere for no reason, for dudes that never even use pouches. Like I just remember Cyclops with his like shoulder safety patrol belt and everything that he would wear, and he would just have pouches on there. Dude literally never took anything out of pouches. No need to.
And then he had his jacket that he just wore on top of it anyway. So it's just like, what are you, like the brown jacket that he always wore?
Cable had pouches for days.
Maybe they just like have a secret action figure collection, so in case they need to pull one out,
That's true. I'd like to think that it's like Transformers, and they have like the Soundwave style tape Transformers that fold flat so you can carry them in your pocket nice and easy. Ravage and Laserbeak come to mind.
That'd be fun.
It says patches store all the gum. That's what Mrs. H says, and that's true. That's true. That's true, because it was the 90s. You got to chew that gum. Now the question was it Bubble Yum? Was it Big League Chew?
Big Red.
Big Red. Oh,
we all remember that Big Red jingle.
Big Red freshness.
No, it's got to be Bubble Tape.
Oh, Bubble Tape.
Oh, yeah, Bubble Tape. And Bubble Yum.
Was that the one where it was like by the yard? Like it would be yards?
Yeah, you could get 6 feet of Bubble Tape.
It literally came in like the
in that tape measure package,
the tape measure thing, yeah.
Oh, but come on, like so I grew up around Little League, right? Didn't everybody love the Big League Chew where it was like where it was shredded and you thought you were like, you pretended like you were chewing tobacco because that's what you did. Like you just take the wad and put it in there. It's like, I got my chew.
You always had too much though, and then like it'd start to expand as you chewed it, and then you just have this mouthful and you're drooling out the front.
Well, that's why it was like that's like you're doing you got chewing there, you got to spit. Like, it was really training for chewing tobacco. It was terrible.
I didn't get to chew a lot of gum. My mom's a chemist, worked for Colgate making toothpaste and everything. So chewing gum was like verboten in our house because, well, it would be bad for your teeth because sugar. So that we didn't get a whole lot of it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Colgate, they got a special proprietary chemical for their toothpaste. My favorite thing about Colgate is that people will buy Tom's of Maine, and like I'm not supporting the big toothpaste people. I'm doing like an independent thing. It's like Colgate owns Tom's of Maine, and they have for like 20 years. Sorry about that. It's like people who are like, I don't do Starbucks. I do Seattle's Best. And it's like, they own them, right? Oh, we got Doug Ernst watching. Good for you. Good.
Yes, good evening, Doug Ernst. And
I'm glad that I've got another person supporting the Big League Chew as the appropriate gum of the 90s. It's like, that's what you do, man.
I'm still an avid supporter of the Bubble Tape. The Bubble Tape was the best one.
Am I the only one that remembers Fruit Stripe with the zebra?
Oh, yeah, I had flavor for 4 seconds.
And of course, Fruit by the Foot. Yep.
Fruit by the Foot.
Yeah, the flavor on that one, literally, like you put it in your mouth. You took like 2 bites or chews or whatever you do with gum, and it was gone.
Now, what about fruit? Do you remember Fruit Roll-Ups? Do they still make Fruit Roll-Ups?
They still make those.
When you had to try to unroll it from the plastic and it just would not separate because it had like heat bonded to it, and it was just
those things were made of some space age material. That's all. That's not food. Whatever it wasn't food.
I love that we were all eating that in such quantities too, and it was just like, yeah, I'm sure it'll stay in my digestive tract for God knows how long.
I was gonna say because was it my wife actually just got her PhD in nutrition, and I remember I was showing all those to her in the grocery store the other day, and she's like, "You know, Mike, you could have been Einstein, but because you ate that stuff, you only got a degree."
Oh yeah, the stuff you know now, you look back at it and it's like, holy crap! I put that in my body.
Yeah.
I just feel like, since we've got Doug in the chat, I'm going to bring this up. When the stuff that we got, try to fit as much.
Something we did in the 90s.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's what.
Or you try to chew it from a distance while someone else was holding the tape measure at the other end of the hallway.
Oh, I mean, the only thing that was better than doing that is, I mean, I'm sure I wasn't the only one who did the experiment with the was it with the soda and was it Pop Rocks? Or what was the
it was Pop Rocks.
Pop Rocks, and you drop it in the soda.
Mentos, you can do it too.
It was Mentos and Diet Coke.
You can do it with Mentos.
That was discovered later. That was discovered in the 2000s.
Mentos was the fresh maker. That's a good one.
That's right.
I just remember the Foo Fighters, one of their first music videos was like making fun of the Mentos commercial. And I just think about it, man. It's like we don't even have a shared culture enough that a music video joke like that would be something most people could get. Because with streaming,
we were the MTV generation. They don't show music television on music television anymore.
Yeah, but that's
they gotta show those like silly reality shows.
Well, let's be realistic. I would go so far as to say, and maybe I'm going to sound like the old dude at this point now, but I would go so far as to say that most of the music that's made these days, I wouldn't classify as music, if I'm just being honest.
I could see that because it almost feels like if you've seen those like AI programs that if you throw a whole bunch of images of a house at it and like computer generates a house, like I do feel like a lot of music is just like that.
Well, like again, date myself. I grew up in, the mid to late 80s and into the 90s. And I grew up listening to, in my house with my dad, it was all heavy metal stuff. And then when it was out on the street with my friends, it was all rap and hip hop and whatnot. So for me to go from, Metallica and Megadeth to, when somebody told me that Maroon freaking 5 classified as rock music these days, I honest to God thought my head was going to blow right off my shoulders, because I was like, there's no goddamn way that you could convince me that this is anything other than crappy pop music with some guitars on the back of it. And then to go from like, in the 80s, you're talking about like, Tech Nine got started in like 85, I think it was, or you're talking about like Run DMC or the Sugar Hill Gang. And now we have, everybody's got the word little in front of their name. I don't care what the second part of their name is because they're all interchangeable as far as I can tell.
Like Lil Chad.
Yeah, I was really.
Well, no, like you get like what is it? Little Uzi and little. Oh my God, one of the dudes in my unit was making fun of me, Little Vert or some stupid thing like that. I'm like, and then they play the music. Some of the younger guys, they play this music for me, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, are they speaking or are they just it literally sounds like they're just drooling into a microphone. Like, this is the worst form of quote unquote rap music I've ever heard in my life. And
we definitely saw it with rap when, like, I mean, no offense, but Snoop Dogg reverted to baby talk. Everything became izzle, drizzle, fizzle, whizzle. And it's like, those aren't even words anymore. Like
HVK's hot take here. And
my milkshake brings the boys to the yard. Okay, you're fucking idiot. That's stupid.
Yeah. People can get mad when I say this. This is the HVK's hot take. Snoop Dogg was never good. Snoop Dogg just got in the game early. That's my take.
I was okay back in the day. I wasn't good, but he was passable.
I was never a fan of his. I think the market was just so small, and he had the street cred when they were trying to bring up the whole gangster rap thing. That's the only reason.
I don't know what
he'll never be no baby.
No, let's stop. Let's that's an East Coast bias right there.
Maybe, for sure. I'm willing to admit that.
I'm from the Midwest.
I mean, Bone Thugs would be your primary. Midwest rap was.
My primary was Slipknot. If we're going with the closest, music I was to.
I mean, Tech is from Kansas City.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that when Dre, Tupac, and Snoop were at their height, they were good.
I think the West Coast rap game in the 90s definitely beat out. I was never a big Biggie fan. I was just never. He was like the main, East Side quote unquote guy, and I was never comparatively speaking, I was never big on him the way I was some of the other ones, like NWA and all that. Like I much preferred that to Biggie.
I was a disturbed teenager, so I was really into Insane Clown Posse for a while there.
Oh, I thought you were about to say you were really into NSYNC.
No, man, Backstreet Boys all the
All
way.
right. Bye.
I was gonna say,
bye
my
with
wife-
that opinion.
My wife would fight you on that. She would say the Backstreet Boys was the superior one, and I would be like, they all suck, so I don't really care.
Okay, number one, they are superior. Their music still stands the
At
test
the
of
end, the
time.
Beastie Boys win that category as far as I'm
Beastie
concerned.
Boys. That was from. They were like already,
Beastie Boys,
classic
yeah, I
rock
mean-
by the time the NSYNC guys came up in the late '90s.
Yeah, but
Beastie
they were a group of guys who were in a band, so they count, right?
Oh, wait, by that token, the Jackson 5 beats them.
Dude,
or
fuck the
even-
Jackson 5.
Or if you want to do
I
that,
was
the
gonna
Beatles.
say-
The Beatles technically count as a boy band.
Fuck them too.
Black Sabbath, the pinnacle of boy bands, Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I'll go with Black Sabbath.
I was gonna say, since we're talking about boy bands, I just remember that was I actually went to Times Square for I think 2011 New Year's, and what was it? It was Backstreet Boy and New Kids on the Block who had like temporarily formed a joint band. And how is this gonna go anywhere?
Timeout. I don't want to hear anybody badmouth NKOTB on our podcast. I'm being serious.
Fuck them.
I'm kidding. But my wife did go see. They every couple of years they'll do a tour where they unite with another boy band, and they do like a let's get the older women nostalgic tour. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
my wife went and saw it, and it was New Kids on the Block, Boys to Men, and I think the other, I want to say 98 Degrees. That was 100% the like.
Can we go back to talking about cool stuff?
Okay. So one thing is, because I know this is something that I wanted to bring up, because I know that you talk about, and we haven't really talked about this a lot on our podcast, which is tabletop gaming. I know Joey, he's a dungeon master du jour. When you do tabletop gaming, is it specific to like the tabletop RPGs? Like what kinds do you prefer?
My intro to it was Dungeons and Dragons, and I was I guess what you would call just a player for a long time there. And I call it being relegated to DM. Everybody looks at like DM is like the next step up above a player, but having done
DM
both,
is the guy who really wants to get the gang together for D&D, but everybody else just wants to play. So he eventually goes, "Fine, I'll run a campaign."
yeah, you're like the cattle wrangler, basically, is what I call being a dungeon master. It's like, hey, we haven't gotten together in a while, and I wrote all these notes, so god damn it, we're gonna do something with this. Otherwise, I've wasted my time. So I get together. It's me, my wife, her sister, her brother, and then her sister's husband. So there's like the group of like 5 of us, and I kind of narrate for them basically. And I usually have like an NPC character that I'll play there. But I also do, and I haven't played Warhammer or MTG in a while, mostly because where I'm stationed right now, I just haven't found any good stores for it. But I do enjoy, like, frankly, just the painting aspect of the Warhammer minis. I just do that as kind of like a relaxation thing. Like I'll put on a podcast or an audiobook or something, and then I'll just kind of sit back and paint a bit. Haven't really been able to do that ever since the baby was born, though. And MTG, I mean, I used to compete doing like modern tournaments and whatnot, but now I just kind of do that casually with like kitchen table commander kind of stuff, just as fun, like whenever you can fit it in kind of things. So
Everybody tells me about Commander. I've never done Commander format.
Commander's a lot of fun. I find Commander to be the most fun when people don't take it super seriously and you build a deck that's just built to do the interactions that you always thought would be cool, but you would never be able to get off in like an actual competitive game because it's either flimsy or it's too easily countered, or like the other deck is just fat, it's like a burn deck and it's too quick and it's going to go underneath what you're trying to do, something like that. And that's what's fun about Commander to me. So literally I built a deck where it's literally all enter the battlefield and leaves the battlefield effects. And it's just about blinking permanents over and over again to get these effects and just spiral out of control. We don't take it super seriously for anything like that. Like I built a deck for my wife where it's basically just passively gaining life until you get a certain series of cards out, where you can either spend your life to kill someone like as like a direct burn, or you can start bleeding people every time you gain life, they lose life kind of thing. And it's just this passive sort of, because she likes that safety net, right? Like she's one of those players. She's a control player. She likes that safety net of nothing happens unless I say it happens. Because she's a woman. Sorry,
Why is she playing blue?
She plays blue, black, white for
I
her
fucking
commander
hate
deck.
blue. I hate blue. I hate blue.
And that's her favorite color is blue. I'm a red player. By definition, I'm a red player. Red's just not typically very good in commander.
Yeah, I'm generally red, and I like to splash black or green in with it.
Yeah. If I'm splashing, it's usually one of those two colors. In some of this stuff, I do like the red blue kind of tempo burn stuff where you get I can't remember the ability where basically you can put temporary 1/1 +1/+1 on your creatures for casting spells, your monastery mentors, your stuff like that. So I do like those sorts of things where you kind of get these like tempo builds where they can spiral up very quickly. But that's about the most that I play with blue. I don't like to sit back and do nothing. I like to just be the aggressor and just go at somebody. It's like I'm going to do these things. I like the
red-black suicide decks where it's just like, yes, everything I'm doing hurts me, but it hurts you more. You'll die first.
Exactly. The life total is a resource kind of mentality.
Yeah. I do like the red-white army decks where you just have fuck tons of tokens that will eventually overwhelm your enemy. But I've always enjoyed in the competitive scene, I really like the draft because the draft, you can't just go buy a fucking badass deck or see whoever won the latest tournament and build their deck. You have to make a deck on the fly, and deck building is my favorite part. So that's the most level playing field in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. You literally took the words out of my mouth. I prefer looking at cards and looking at interactions, like trying to build something, either on the fly or in a constructed format, and just take the cards, take the things and try to maximize what it can do. Sometimes you get something that's very middle of the road, but it's consistent, or you end up with something that's super powerful, but flimsy with it. It's either very easy to disrupt or it has a low chance of actually all coming together. But I do like, that's why I love deck building. It's like, to me, it's almost like a puzzle, and you have to solve the puzzle at that point.
It's always the shittiest part, though, isn't it? Like, there's that one card that completely fucks over my deck, and I didn't know about it until you played it just now.
The other player, and it's usually, in my experience, because I don't play control, it's usually the control player. They always get that point where they can sit back and relax in their chair and just kind of laugh because you're staring at the card and they know you've read it like 10 times. Because you're looking for like some sort of way to rules lawyer.
I just don't want it to say that.
Exactly. Like there has to be a way I can twist these words to be like, well, it doesn't completely fuck me. It just sort of does.
But there's still some way either around it or some way to get these other cards to combine together again. Yes.
Yeah, I managed that once. Back in the day, I was playing my red deck against some blue guy who was using Teferi's Moat and every other fucking blue card. He thought he was completely unstoppable because he gave himself protection from red. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And then I drew my card that turns all my mountains into 3/1 creatures. And he's like, well, but I still have protection from red. I'm like, mountains are lands. Lands are colorless. You're dead. I win.
That rare interaction where people forget that lands are colorless, which is I always like when you're playing against a control player, especially as a burn player, right? Like you just throw lightning bolts at people's faces and you run little shitsy goblins at them that they don't blink an eye at. And then
I missed the goblin grenade. The goblin grenade was one of the best.
Oh, that's a great card. But they always do the thing. I always love I always call it the post-game analysis, right? Where they're just like, well, if I had one more turn, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't. And
my deck is designed to make sure you don't get that turn. That's the whole point of a red burn deck.
Exactly. You're waiting for turn 5. I'm looking to kill it turn 4. And it's like that's the whole thing. If it goes any longer than that, my chances of winning go down exponentially every turn after that. So I need to kill you before that happens. I really do miss MTG in that competitive sense. But like I said, Commander, if you haven't played it, Commander is a lot of fun. And there are a lot of cards that are actually really good for Commander that you can build a Commander deck with that are actually really cheap because they don't get used in competitive play. But those big like 7-mana spells that are awesome that you never get to see, you'll see them in Commander. And, if you're just playing with people that are just taking it casual and, you're going to get those people that if you go to a shop and play, I've had it where people like they look at your Commander and they know what sort of deck you're going to be playing. And then everyone at the table is just like, all right, well, we're going to get this guy out first. And it's like, well, that's not even fun at that point. Like, you're just being gunned at, because it's usually a group of 4 people in a game. And it's like, you're being gunned at 3 against 1. It's like, well, what am I going to do? You know, like it's that's not how I like to play Commander. I just like to sit back, you know, play casual. It kills a couple hours, and you know, you're just enjoying yourself. That's how I like to play Commander, at least.
Yeah, plus I can't keep up with how fast they release sets these days. I always really enjoyed the Ravnica blocks because I liked the odd color combinations when they did the Ravnica blocks, but they did it maybe a year or two back, a few years back, and like it seemed like that block cycled out in less than a year, and I was just like, I'm not buying this many fucking cards just so that I can go play Magic. I'm just not.
Well, that's one of the reasons I moved away from Standard. I felt the same way, that they were cycling new sets in so quickly. The amount of time that the card was legal wasn't worth the amount of money I would have to spend in order to make it all happen. So I was like, you know, let me play Modern, play cards that aren't going to rotate out.
Ms. H,
You know,
real men play Magic.
I have never played
But
Pokemon.
I was in high school right when these cards were coming out, so unfortunately, like I just missed that era.
Clearly, Digimon is the real correct answer.
I don't think, unless you're talking about Pokemon cards, because the Magic the Gathering been around since the 80s, like the early 80s.
This killed me when I started seeing how much some of those cards were worth. Like, me and my brother started collecting in, like, not Alpha, not that early, but it was like the Arabian Nights era, I think, was when we first started collecting, and seeing how what the value of some of those cards became over time. Like, I mean, you're a little kid, you don't think in those terms, and then you're looking back at it, and I'm just like, man, if I had the ability to go back in time, I would just be like, look, put that in a binder, never touch it, never lose it, and it'll pay for everything you could possibly need when you get older.
Oh, I've got a few of those cards, but unfortunately, it's all about the condition, and I don't have any of them that are in great condition anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's why you don't touch it. That's why I would be like, look, just, I know you want to mess with it, just don't touch it. Forget it exists, but don't lose it.
I just
That
know
makes me-
that comic book stores now are subsisting on selling Magic and Pokemon more than new comic books, and it's crazy to me.
Dude, Friday Night Magic is one of the biggest moneymakers for a comic book store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Friday Night Magic.
Oh, Mrs. H never found anyone to play with for D&D. Joey, you got to do a remote D&D session.
That's right.
I
You've
don't
been
know.
voluntold.
I'm such a Puritan when it comes to D&D. I want
Don't-
paper and pencils.
But
and
don't
dice.
they have like that whole system now, right, where you can do like a digital.
Oh yeah, but it's annoying. I don't like it. I hate it. I tried it.
It is hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, because I'm kind of the same way. So when we started this campaign that I'm doing with my in-laws and everything, the mental blocks I have to get over just to make it happen is kind of hard, because you like having everything like drawn out in front of you, and we just do it over Discord, and it really does, to me at least, there's still a weird feeling about it, probably because I've played for almost 30 years doing it one way, and then you kind of switch it over. But me being moved around all over the country every couple of years, like, if we didn't do it this way, it would never work. And that was kind of my concession to it.
It sounds like you do the online D&D stuff. Do you use any particular software? Because I know there's a lot of different platforms out there.
Like I said, we play over Discord, and I will, and I do it like really like ghetto style, where I'll draw up maps and things like that, and then I'll just take pictures of them with my phone, upload them to Discord, and then there are actual Discord bots that you can use as like role bots and everything like that. Like, if you want to make sure that the people you're playing with stay honest. I just play with family, so I just kind of like.
So you're not like using Tabletop Simulator or anything like that?
No, nothing like that. I just, like I said, I do it really low to the ground, because we only really get to play like maybe once a month if we're lucky. Like, it's just because, adulting happens between my job, my wife's job, the baby now, everyone, all of our family members have jobs. It's just sometimes lining it all up can be really difficult. So we might go 2 or 3 months at a time where we don't get to play. Like, I think the last time we played was probably back in February. And we just haven't been able to line up since then. So it just wasn't worth me putting all that investment into it. And instead, it's just, you know what, I'll just do it, down and dirty style. And it still works. It still gets the point across. And it's mostly just about, everybody having fun. And it's mostly, most of the time when I DM for them, because they'll just kind of entertain themselves, I just put them in situations that I know they're going to respond in ways that is just funny. Like, I've been playing for almost 30 years. And in the last campaign that I did, one of the last game sessions we did, I ended up doing a Christmas campaign. We ended up playing Christmas night. And my brother-in-law, who's actually been on my show, he did something that I didn't expect, because I basically based the campaign off of the Nightmare Before Christmas, and they were fighting Oogie Boogie at the end of it. And he was drunk by the end of the night, and he just decided that he was going to roll an intimidation for taking a shit on Oogie Boogie's floor to show him that he wasn't messing around, and he rolled a natural 20 with it. And I'm like, well, now I have to roll with this because I can't ignore this. And it was one of the most hysterical things that it just kind of broke down into there. And then he was like dipping his arrows in his feces. It went off the rails, but that's how you know a D&D session is, in my opinion, going well, because things are absolutely out of control.
It happens. It happens a lot.
It's got to be the first time I've heard of rolling the natural 20 to drop the twos. So,
like I said, 30 years in, that was the first time it happened. And I'm like, I can't possibly let this go. So shout out to him for doing something everybody says in jest. He was, I guess, far enough gone that he was just like, I'm going for it.
Creative solutions right there, man.
Yeah, this is the Dave Chappelle meme. Modern problems require modern solutions.
if you're going to roll a natural 20, that's where to do it.
That was the only reason I really went with it. He rolled a 20, and I was like, well, I got to honor this now. So,
well, what's funny is if you've played D&D for any length of time, the natural 20s usually happen on the worst checks. It's usually when you don't want the natural 20 that you get the natural 20.
oh yeah, it's something stupid. It always is. It's like, oh, you're sneaking through the woods, and what do you want to do? Oh, I want to make sure that there's nothing sneaking up on us or whatever. And it's like you roll a natural 20. It's like, well, that was kind of wasted. Then you're fighting the boss, and it's like, oh, I rolled 3 ones in a row.
Oh yeah.
Like my sister-in-law, she's playing a dual-wielding warrior right now, and my wife's playing a cleric, and they basically just roided the hell out of the warrior, right? Just buffed her up, and then she went in to hit the boss. Rolled for both of her attacks, rolled 2 ones, and I was like, well, you dropped both your swords, and that's that. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I've done that. I've dropped 3 weapons when I was playing my ranger back in the day, and as a result, that ranger carried like 7 weapons.
it's funny. My first character was a ranger. I did the same thing. He had 4 short swords, a bow, and like a bunch of knives, and they were like, why do you need that much stuff? It's like, because my rolls are that bad. That's why I need that much stuff.
2 long swords, a falchion just in case, a knife in each boot, his bow. I carried a flail just in case we ran into skeletons, because that went so fucking wrong the first time.
I was going to say, in computer gaming, this sounds just like if you guys ever played Battle for Wesnoth.
No, but you showed it to me once.
Yeah, it was a real classic, like, turn-based role-playing game, and for some reason, it reminds me of a lot of scenarios where you have the geographic advantage, like 2-1, and somehow every single attack you throw misses. Then your army gets cut in half in seconds. So,
Oh yeah, low-level adventurers are fodder, dude. It's like you don't start kicking ass until like 7th, 8th level at best. The newer D&D is very different. I'm not a fan, and I don't like the direction that Wizards is trying to take 5e right now. I hate everything they're doing to get back on more current events. But I mean, I'm real close to just running with Pathfinder for a while and seeing where that takes me.
I still just DM off of 3.5.
We do a lot of 3.5 still because we have like every book that 3.5 ever published.
Yeah,
we know all the people
same here. And then I just kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, course correct. Because like one of my favorite things about D&D is it's like when you play with certain people and they're like, well, the rules, I've had people do this to me. It's like, well, the rules say this. And it's like, look, I told you when you wanted to play with us that I fix things as I see fit. Like one of the problems I have with 3rd and 3.5 edition is there are certain skills, like the list of skills is ungodly to me. And the fact that like certain things don't cross over, like I'll give 5th edition credit in this department where they have like your athletics and acrobatics rather than like, you have tumble and balance and jump and climb and swim and all these things. And it's like, I understand that these are individual skills, but to a certain extent, I just want to streamline things. Because I remember back in the day, we would like focus so much on being like these war gods with our characters, and then you'd come to a river, and it would take you 3.5 hours to cross a goddamn river, and it's like I don't.
And you might die.
Yeah, especially because my ranger has to have 55 pounds worth of gear for a very stealthy class, but
Yeah, and
You know, I was
you
young.
took hide, you took move silent, you took handle animal, you took wilderness lore, you took all those. Didn't put any points in swim, did you?
No, never. And that's why I was like, all right, I'm going to condense some of these down because nobody wants to play that mental math min-max game with all those things. Like people just want to play. So there are certain things that I've streamlined down for that. And as a DM, like I'm like, look, I'm going to take as many liberties as I want with the game because who's going to tell me no? You know, like really, like I'm just going to take as many liberties as I want. Like if I want to have certain things happen, regardless of what I as the DM roll, any DM who says they've never done this, I feel like is lying. If there are certain things you want to happen narratively, you roll as like a gesture, but you already have the outcome predetermined. Or like,
Oh, I'll tell the players because my players are the ones that love to shout something out before I can finish explaining what's happening because they think they're going to get me. And I'll tell the players, I'm like, this is a cinematic sequence.
I'm going to use that next time. Be like, no talking, cinematic sequence. Or like, I can mold classes to fit certain things, you know? Like, my brother-in-law is really into Star Wars. He wanted to play something akin to a Jedi. So basically, I took a druid and I've kind of played fast and loose with how druids operate to make them a little bit more Jedi-esque. Is that in the rules? No. Am I allowed to do that? Well, it depends on who's asking. As far as I'm concerned, I paid for the books. I have all the rule sets. I have the understanding. I can do what I want. It makes the players happy. It doesn't affect the story in any way whatsoever. It's not like he's going to be this uber powerful thing compared to everyone else. You balance it out in certain ways, and he understands that. So it's, you know, I look at it as like, as a DM, as the storyteller, for lack of a better term, as the narrator, I want to put them in positions that they're going to have fun with. I want to challenge them. I'm not going to spoon feed them. And then, you know, there will be penalties for stupid things, but it's like, I'm also there to put them in situations that they're going to have fun with. So if you roll a 20 for taking a shit on the floor, we're going to roll with you taking a shit on the floor, and Oogie Boogie's going to be scared of it because why the hell not? It makes for a story that you want to tell later.
You do want to have fun with the storytelling. You do want to make sure that your players are enjoying the story and getting engaged. There do have to be stakes, though. My oldest, he joined our table for a campaign, and he learned that the hard way because he made this little goblin character, and they died in the first encounter. And I didn't even realize the character. I was like, "All right, you got hit for 12 damage." He's like, "I'm dead." I'm like, "You're dead?
Yeah.
What's your constitution?" He's like, "My constitution is 6. I was like, "Did you make constitution your dump stat?" He's like, "Yeah." Well, learn never to do that again because I'm not fudging it. Your character's dead, dude.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I've played with people where other people were DMing. I've played with certain other people where their DM style was basically like there's almost no player freedom, right? Where it's almost entirely, to use your terminology, like a cinematic, and then it's like you have option A, B, or C, and then the players make decisions based off that, and then he starts talking again, and it's like, well, am I here for your, you know, your draft of your novel, or am I here to actually play? And then I have other people that I've played with where literally players can do the absolute dumbest thing, and they always find a way to like save the players. You know what I mean? Where, you know, they're like, oh yeah, well, I've never had a player character die, and it's like, how? You know, even through just dumb luck of the dice, eventually a player character dies.
That should not be a mark of pride. And I'm not saying go kill off the characters, but it should be challenging. And there should be the chance that your character doesn't make it, especially if you do something stupid.
Yeah, we had so funny story. So in our very first campaign, we were all obviously much younger, and one of the guys that we were playing with was an older dude. We were all like young teenagers, and these guys were guys that we were working with, and they were like 16, 17 years old. One of the dudes had been playing for like 5 years, and he was playing a half vampire, and there was a hallway of gems, basically, like the walls were gemstones. And we found out that it was a trap, that if you pry one of the gems off, they were loose enough to pry off, but the walls kind of close. Well, as a vampire, he could turn into mist, right? So he would pry one off and turn into mist, pry one off, turn into mist. We played with this other idiot that nobody liked. And I don't know why he played with us or why we wanted him to play with us, because none of us liked him, but he was there anyway, and we usually just made fun of him because we were nice people as kids. And he decided after we actually beat the boss dude of this first part of the campaign that he was going to get one, and didn't, for whatever reason. And it's not like he was playing in character, because he didn't do that sort of thing, but he didn't quite put two and two together that if he pries one of these off, he can't turn into Mist because he's a human. And he literally pulped his character right after we killed the boss. And the DM was like, what do you want me to do? Like, I didn't tell you to do this. Like, he was like begging, like, you got to save my guy. He's like, how do I save your guy? Explain it to me. Your dude's literally just pizza sauce. Like, how do I save him? And it's like, yeah, you know, actions should have consequences within the game. That's what part of what makes it feel like you're actually playing something. You know, you get the game over screen. Yeah, well, you won't do that again.
Very much so. And that's not one of those resurrectable situations. Like you could be resurrected as paste. Like,
we tried, us being the kind, compassionate, caring individuals. We were like, can we loot his body though? The DM was like, what body? There's nothing there. Like, he got smashed. It was a whole thing.
yeah,
But
his armor is crushed. His sword is bent in half. Like, he's not useful to you anymore.
yeah, that's literally what he said. He's like, all of his gear is basically destroyed. Like, he's just flattened out. And it was, you know, it was a whole thing. And then, you know, that guy was begging for like 2 weeks to, you know, you got to bring me back. And eventually just re-rolled another character. But
I was gonna say, roll up a new character, dude. Like,
that was basically the outcome. And it was, you know, but going back to my original point, like when you have a DM that treats everything with the kid gloves, you can do any stupid thing you want at that point, and then there's never any blowback for it. What's the point at that point? You know, like, you're just being
You're playing a very different kind of game at that point.
Yeah,
you're just basically guiding a bunch of murder hobos across the countryside, because that's what they will become.
effectively, yeah, because there's no ramifications for it, right? Like, that's the hard part about being a DM sometimes, for me at least, is just keeping all the notes there of like, okay, well, what do they do in this town? You know, what do they do in this region? What's kind of their, for lack of a better term, their reputation level in these areas? Because, you know, they might be really well liked in one area because things went well, and then in another area, somebody just decided that they were going to speak in a way that was just the wrong way to talk to a particular character, and now their reputation's kind of in the gutter. And that's the hard part, just keeping all of those things straight. And then as the DM, you know, speaking for the NPCs that in those manners. For me, that's always the hard part to keep track of, especially with so much gap time between each campaign, or not campaign, but between each session. That's where it gets difficult.
I would try to memorize it, yeah.
The hard part for me is always, I will make these throwaway NPCs where they're like, I want to go find a blacksmith. And I'm like, cool, you found a blacksmith. And they're like, hi, what's your name? And I'm like, fuck.
Oh, I'm terrible with names.
My name is Fred. I am Fred the blacksmith. And then Fred the blacksmith becomes like a staple character that they go to for everything. And I'm like,
Yep. No, I've had that happen. I literally had to take like the Stan Lee alliteration approach, because otherwise I never remember the names. So like Billy Blacksmith, like that's who he is. It's just Billy Blacksmith. And it's like, I need someone to enchant this. And it's like, well, here's Eddie Enchanter, you know, like that's the only way I can keep it straight.
At one point, I had the Dwarven Master Chef and the Dwarven Carpenter that they had hired, who was Ronald Archbelly and McDonald Archbelly, because I couldn't come up with anything better.
It should have been Mig Ronalds, remember?
This was before that. This was a long time ago. I still remember the characters because they became such a quintessential part of that campaign.
I know we're up on the hour, so we'll transition to free play in a minute. So maybe that'll be the next thing we should jump in on, is on just like the fun of character creation. But in that case, yeah, just for our audio guys, so he can round out the episode. If you don't mind taking just a second real quick, HVK, is there a channel that people can check you out on, or just a place that they can go and find you if they want to just see more of what you do?
Sure. So I release my stuff on Podbean and Spotify are the main two, but you can find it on like Amazon and Apple as well. Spotify is the main one that I always usually provide links to. So if you just go to Spotify and search for Americanon, just AMERICANON, I should be like the first one that pops up. You'll know it because it's this hoodie dude with a just like that. It's just the thumbnail is a hoodie dude with the American flag bandana,